I'm going to call to order this work session of the Larimer County Board of Commissioners. Today is Wednesday, August 28th, 2019. Today, the board has a work session with members of our Agricultural Advisory Board regarding a land evaluation site assessment tool. I am Tom Donnelly. I'm the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners this year. I am joined by John Kafalis, Commissioner from District 1, Steve Johnson, Commissioner from District 2, and our County Manager, Linda Hoffman, is with us at the controls. We have a few folks here from the Ag Advisory Board, so for anyone who might be listening in, could I ask you to all introduce yourselves to put a voice with a name? You want to start, Jason?
Sure. Jason Brothers, member of the Ag Advisory Board.
Very good.
George Wallace, Ag Advisory Board.
Jen Cram, Larimer County Community Development and Staff Liaison to the Agricultural Advisory Board.
Zach Thode, Ag Advisory Board.
Great. Who'd like to begin? George?
I'll start because I went through last night and summarized just a little bit about what we're up to.
Oh, no, these are mine.
What are you up to?
Yeah, what are you up to?
What we're up to is back in the 90s, nationwide, there was a program spearheaded by USDA working with local government to develop a land evaluation and site assessment document and, tool for helping local governments evaluate, given limited resources and high costs, what kinds of ag land does it make sense to preserve? It was, even though it was they gave a national framework for doing it, they encouraged local governments to individualize it. And we did that in '97 in Larimer County. And we had quite a long list of people participating. It's interesting to look back. Some of them are no longer with us. People like Lou Grant and John Worthington and other well-known people. But a lot of things have happened since '97 along the Northern Front Range. Growth in land prices and water prices and different programs that are available now to purchase or help purchase or partner with other entities to protect ag land resources. And so we went back through this as an ag board at the suggestion of commissioners several years ago and have revised it, hopefully in a way that makes a lot more sense for today. We've put a lot more. This evaluation system is divided into two parts. One is the evaluation of the land itself, the soils more than anything else. And then the site assessment, which has to do with a whole lot of things like the community benefits that parcel might provide with respect to habitat, visual resources, cultural, historic resources, how productive is it, and historically and so forth. So we've made a number of changes to the site assessment part of it. The land evaluation is pretty much just the science that they originally came up with, which is NRCS, originally SCS, has evaluated all the soils in the county, and you use them all the time for planning purposes. And you can look at what percentage of a parcel is in each category, soil class, and assign points to it that way. And we've left that alone. It makes good sense, good science the way it is, and things haven't changed out there on the ground. But the site assessment part, we've made a number of changes, especially given the high costs and limited resources that we have. We've added some major sections on production history and water yield and reliability. as well as some new criteria for contiguity, which is a whole new category, strategic value, and small changes to a couple of the other categories. So we'll take you through it if that's all right. If you've got copies that we can look at together in front of you, and there'll be one right here. We thought also with these revisions that it will be easier as we start to work on things like if we revitalize the TDR concept, or as we analyze the concept of ag districts again. This will help us. And the last time this was used was with the Malcho farm, and it wasn't very satisfactory. Charlie Gindler used it at that time, and he felt like, wow, there's a lot of things we can do to improve it, and he was with us as long as he was under the employee of the county, and now Travis Rollins, Jason, myself, and we've consulted. We've presented this to the Open Lands Advisory Board. They have endorsed it wholeheartedly, and county staff has been kept apprised through Jen. And so really our last step before we hand it back to the county for a score sheet that they can use is to present it to you and get your blessing or not. Okay, so Jason, here's the latest one. Yeah, you going to Zach?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, as we've given you one example on the second page of how you would simply look at the soils and evaluate the capability class, the percent of the site in each class, and come up with a total value for that. And there's the scoring now, in order to balance out the land evaluation, the site assessment, which we've given a lot more value to, is 300 total points for land evaluation and 700 for site assessment. The first factor on page 3 of the site assessment, we never really had a very good way of evaluating some of the smaller farms that have become pretty predominant since '97. And so we've divided that farm size and productivity into two sections. The farm size section was originally, they gave a lot more points the bigger the parcel was, which doesn't make as much sense now because we're not buying big ranches and big farms as much as we are buying parcels that complement places that have already been protected or within highly productive areas. So we've given a point system for grazing ranches like the one Zach manages in the foothills, where as we work on the ag districts, we're going to talk a lot about the difference between and the importance of foothills ranches and the plains irrigated cropland. So we've got a scaling for crops, and on the fourth page you'll see we've got for the first time a way of looking at smaller parcels. These values, CSAs, as a lot of you know them, which raise all kinds of different things at once. So you have to kind of use a gross income per acre figure rather than what you might do with a crop farm, a commodity farm. To do these evaluations, we'll use the statistics that the state of Colorado has in place already, and also we'll be developing the gross income, median gross income for the smaller acreages as we go. The producers that we have talked to have given us a figure to start with, which is $33,000 an acre for all the vegetable, concentrated vegetable, direct market kinds of farms. The next section, value of water rights for irrigated farms and ranches. And if you have questions at any time about the way we're assigning points to these things, we'll attempt to give you our best thinking on it. Jason is our water expert and really did a great job of coming up with the original. Lisa just looked at the kind of water that was available on a farm, and it didn't look at it very carefully. So we've divided it into adequacy and reliability. Jason, why don't you take that part?
Okay. Really the performance measure of an irrigation water source falls into two classes. There's the yield, the size of the water supply, whether it's adequate or not to irrigate the crop, and the reliability. So is that water supply available in wet, dry, and average years, or does it come and go as you have variable conditions? And so we split the water supply score into those two categories, adequacy and reliability. And we tried to use objective measures to score that. The gross yield of the water supply is the first part. If it's sprinkler irrigated, the gold standard there is basically 24 inches. With flood irrigation, that's a much less efficient method of irrigation. So that requires more water for an adequate supply for the crop, and so the standard there is 36 inches or more. With reliability, we basically decided to compare the 2002 drought year, the yield of the water in that year, with a 20-year average. And so the more reliable the water supply, the closer those two will match. So the 2002 yield will approach that longer-term average for a reliable senior water supply. For a more junior water supply or less reliable water supply, you'll see a great difference between that dry year and the average. So we chose that as the objective measure of reliability for the water supply.
Jason, in the Table 3, the average annual water yield, why is it that you focused on sprinkler watering systems, flood irrigation, and then the other? I mean, is it mostly those two? Why did you just focus on those and perhaps not other kinds of watering systems that might even be more water efficient?
Well, I'm assuming you're speaking about drip irrigation.
I guess so. If it can be done on that large of a scale, if we're talking about big farms,
Sure. It's much less prevalent on particularly large farms. You probably see it in less than 1% of large farms. On small farms, you'll see it more frequently, but even then, it's probably on 20% or less of the small farms. Also, when we talk about the sprinkler irrigation, that's at about 85 to 90% efficient, whereas drip irrigation, it's probably most frequently operated at about 95% efficient, so it's not a huge difference. Flood irrigation is probably 50 or 60% efficient. So the difference between the methods is small once you get to sprinkler and more improved systems.
And my follow-up question is probably due to my ignorance on these matters. How is it that overhead or sprinkler system irrigation is more efficient than flood irrigation? For example, often I'll see farmers irrigating in the middle of the day when I guess the water is available, and isn't there a lot of water loss due to transpiration? So I guess I don't understand.
So both of those systems will operate day long, 24 hours. So flood irrigation will be occurring all day long during the middle of the day, just as sprinkler irrigation will be. Sprinkler irrigation gives you a lot more control over how much you deliver and it allows you to spread that water evenly over the field.
Distribution.
So when you flood irrigate, you might, to get to the end of the feed, to get from the ditch to this end of the field, you may have to soak water down 10 feet into the ground just to get the water to this
Right.
end of the ground. And so
Right, right.
You use a heck of a lot more water just to get the whole field covered. And
Right, so at the top of the field, your
can apply,
percolation below the root zone is going to be quite significant. At the bottom end of the field, you have to produce runoff in order to adequately water the bottom end of the field.
Most of those guys have those heads on those rubber hoses now that hang down in the crop too, and so it,
Right.
you know, I don't think
Like I'm irrigating corn today, and my droppers are actually that far into the corn.
Yeah,
They're being drugged through the corn. And if I'm do beans next year, I'll drop them down
even
closer
further,
to the
you lose
ground.
less through evaporation and keeps
Exactly.
more of the water with the plant. Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you have a drip irrigation system, do you score it as if it were a sprinkler system?
it's, the document right now is silent to drip irrigation.
So they wouldn't get any points if
But-
they used that? That doesn't seem
I
logical.
think you would treat it as a sprinkler system.
Okay. If it's
the-
close to the same
the-
efficiency, it should. would make
Yeah,
sense,
and
right?
the key there is that you have a high degree of control over the distribution and the amount of water that's applied. That's really the key distinction. With flood irrigation, you don't have that control.
So Commissioner Johnson, do you think it would be appropriate to add drip then to this statement?
If it's 90-95 compared to 60, yeah, I would.
Being silent to it, maybe
Yeah, I would, because somebody
So,
using this
I
might,
would,
a
I
staff
would agree,
person using
and
it
perhaps it
might.
could serve as an incentive. If it's called out, and there might be some benefits as far as the site assessment.
so
An incentive, yeah.
So the way Table 3 is configured, you have the depth of application or the depth of water available. And I don't think it would really be different for drip versus sprinkler. We might just,
Do a slash
Slash.
drip,
or high
Yeah.
efficiency or something like
yeah,
that.
I mean,
sprinkler slash drip.
it's probably not worth a separate category to say, you
Right.
know, 25 inches or 23 inches for drip. And what, 11 to 23 in the next category.
But I would hate to see a bureaucrat give
I know.
somebody
Right.
0 points.
You're neither of those, you don't get any
Because
points.
you're not
Sure,
in.
sure. No, I think that'd be a worthwhile addition.
Building's full of bureaucrats.
I know, there's the chief bureaucrat down there,
A pencil pusher.
bureaucrat in charge. There she is.
We take that as a compliment.
agreed with me.
I can see it happening.
Yeah,
That's all it says.
a planner.
We added the bottom two
Yeah.
early on and off dates because we're of the people that do value added crops that start earlier and go later, the farmers market types. And for any farm or ranch, the early on and off dates give you, a lot more flexibility depending on the weather and what you're working on. So
Yeah,
that's why that's in there.
a shorter irrigation season will give the producer drastically fewer choices in the crops that can be raised on that particular piece of ground.
On the reliability, y'all understand the difference between the augmented, the non-tributary wells, and that kind of stuff.
I think so.
Okay. Okay, land condition. Of course, erosion and weeds are always two indicators of stewardship and how that land is, how much it would take to get it back to a more productive state. Erosion is a tough one because once you've lost the soil, you're really not going to get it back. So that's a much more important indicator. Weeds you can get back to, but it also takes a number of years. And if the county's going to be spending money on trying to get, make this a functioning parcel, why?
So if someone is alternating, rotating the fields, and they're putting in cover crops, I mean, it's beneficial in terms of preventing soil erosion. So would that farm get more points?
From hemp to marijuana.
It would, if there is evidence if there's not evidence already of severe erosion, that would be certainly factored in. And it is a way, I mean, that's a management practice as distinguished from the condition you buy that parcel in.
Okay.
Now, there is a difference. I mean, you may fight like heck to get back from erosion, and it might take you 50 years before you build that topsoil back up. It might not. It might take you, with cover cropping, it might be quicker.
Okay, thank you.
Contiguity is a whole new section. And we thought, because of all the issues that have come up about right to farm and how much, and the investment we've already made, let's take the area between Fort Collins and Wellington, a highly productive area on both sides of I-25, the Buckeye area as well. It used to be the criteria was the further away from an annexed boundary, the more points you got, which no longer really makes sense because we're thinking about things like community separators. We're thinking about where we already have families that have donated easements or bargain sale easements. If we can add to that block, we make their lives easier. We make it more likely that others will stay in production besides just the parcel you're partnering on, whether it be a fee simple acquisition or a part of an easement or whatever it is. So contiguity, and again, smaller direct market farms, that's a tougher one because sometimes they exist in isolated places around the city, but if they're in a good place with good soil, good water, and good marketing potential, then we would look for a way to take that into consideration. But adjacent to other agricultural operations or adjacent to or proximal to parcels that have already been conserved, both will get you points. The other public values, we've made minor modifications on habitat. One of the things we've added, if you look at Table 5, is before we used to just go on the Colorado Natural Heritage Program's rating for were there species there that were threatened or endangered and being protected. I'm showing my bias here. Some of us, a number of us, have worked hard on habitat and replaced habitat that's been lost with habitat that's been man-made. And it doesn't necessarily involve endangered species, but provides for a lot of species adjacent to the ag operation. And it doesn't always make it easier. I mean, I've got coon traps out around the corn now. We have too many whitetails. We've got a lot of blackbirds because we created wetlands right next to it. So it's the work. You have to work at it, but it does provide the kind of benefits that the public increasingly is asking for. Oh, strategic value. The only thing we added were on Table 6 were the last two. If the parcel is next to and buffers a dairy or a concentrated animal feeding operation, we think that's important because that entity is both buying a lot of forage and grain from other farmers and also for organic producers is providing the nutrients back out. So that's we hadn't really looked at them previously as that being, and it also mitigates the potential for conflict with development. And here's where we get the small farms in and around town some points if they are strategically located. Visual is the same as the 97 version. Malcho's is a good example of a farm that allows people driving by it to have an uninterrupted view of the foothills and backcountry. Oh, and I think that's it, except for a minor change to cultural and historic, which it was either all or nothing in the original one. You either got some points or you didn't, but the truth is, lots of places have some features of history and local interest. Roberts Ranch that Zach manages has lots of them, but there are others that don't have that many, but I think should get a few points for what they do have.
Okay.
And there you have it.
How do you use this in planning? How is it being used in planning? Or I guess maybe we're using it in planning. And when you first started, I thought this was something that we mapped all of the agricultural parcels and we gave them all this.
Not really. It's if there have been times in recent years where 4 or 5 farmers at once have come to the Open Lands program and asked, "Are you interested in buying our place?" And this would help sort through that. If we work on the concept of an ag district, we might look at multiple places and using some of these criteria as before we went and asked how many people within that geographic area would volunteer to be part of an ag district, that kind of thing. But I don't think we're going to get the black helicopter criticism for,
I was going to ask you that too. How would producers view something like this? If I got a high score on this, would the county be less likely to zone my property for lucrative development or something? Would that be viewed negatively by a producer, or would it be viewed positively that my land and surrounding land has a high agricultural value might be protected?
And I think that's so. Since we created the document in the 90s, I believe that mostly Natural Resources and Open Lands have been using it to evaluate open land purchases of agricultural properties. But as we move forward with, what we've learned from the comp plan update and moving into the land use code update, we see this as a tool. For example, with the conservation development, we ask people to set aside 80% as residual land.
Planning.
Planners could use this as a tool to say, what acreage of that development makes the most sense to be held as residual land. We are looking at the creation of agricultural districts. It would likely be a voluntary process, but this could help to help us in the decision-making process of where does it make sense to have agricultural districts, based on contiguity or the more productive smaller farms, things like that. So this is really a tool that's been used mostly by Natural Resources, but I think that planning, community development could start using it as well. So we appreciate the work that the Agricultural Advisory Board has put into this to make it more contemporary.
How much ag community engagement has there been in terms of updating this tool?
Thus far, it's been vetted through the Agricultural Advisory Board. Then we went to the Natural Resources staff. Then we shared it with the Open Lands Advisory Board, and now you. And once you're comfortable with it, then we can start doing some outreach and figuring out where it makes sense. Of course, we want to get it on the website. There's a few follow-up steps that we'd like to do. We need to Open Lands will be creating a scoring sheet and some things that are supplemental to this, but then we can start sharing it with other people. And I think I'd love for Jason and George to chime in because they had some ideas of how we could get this out to the greater community as well.
We think it might be useful to lots of other jurisdictions too. So, and I think it makes if we do a good job, it makes Larimer County kind of leading out, and this is a national system. It's got acceptance all over the country already. Lots of jurisdictions use it. It's a matter of a lot of them probably have outdated versions too, and so we might be able to extend it out through what's the county commissioner and the statewide county commissioner group called?
Oh, CCI.
Yeah. Or through extension.
There's
and some other tools like that.
there's a statewide. The name of the organization escapes me right now, but there's a statewide open lands conservation group that.
Colorado Open Lands.
Well, Colorado Open Lands is
Is a land trust.
Yeah, it's a,
He's talking about an association.
yeah, there's,
Okay.
yeah. And that organization has an annual convention.
They do.
And,
I spoke at it one year in Estes Park.
right.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, there is an
They were
association
scraping the
of all the
bottom of the
land
barrel.
trusts too.
The welcome
that-
or what?
You know,
Yes.
Wow.
this is great work, and I think examples are always helpful. So maybe not in this broader outreach, but taking 2 or 3 properties that we know through the old system and the new system and showing how they score might be a way of kind of absorbing in a more familiar way what the results would be of this, or are of this change.
And we've got some property like the Maxwell Farm, the city. So I think the city will use this too. That would be a good first place to go. Maxwell Farm, Maxwell Farm, we could do that comparison on those kinds of places.
Or maybe, I don't know what the good examples would be, but maybe a cropland
And a ranch.
resource and a rangeland resource, and maybe something that we passed on, or, I just think it would be useful to, and more tangible.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the sheets of numbers, you don't really know how that's gonna add up and what the results will be. So to be able to relate that to property we're familiar with, I think might help us understand the difference.
Okay, we'd have to probably get people from natural areas and maybe 2 or 3 different people that have paid staff help with that. Because
Yeah, right.
Right,
it-
right. I didn't mean that you had to do it. I just think it would be a useful thing
Jen,
to
Jen
have
can
done.
Jen can push that. Yeah.
It'd help, but not
Yeah.
do the whole thing.
Right.
We'll edit it.
Well, the only place where I saw really kind of subjective language is in this last one. Many significant features, some features, at some point.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
And that's okay. I'm not saying that there's a different way of doing it or a better way of doing it, but
Mhm.
I think.
Well, some of those, see the criteria above that table? That gives you the things to look at. It's not necessarily totally open. There's some things that are pretty well agreed on. Like, does the Overland Trail go through here? Is there an old stage stop? Is it a Centennial Farm?
Right.
Is it on the historic register? There's one near me where a wagon load of nitroglycerin blew up and left a crater. And
What the hell was he doing with
And you don't know
nitroglycerin?
anything about it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What were you planning to do with it, George?
Yeah, where were you on that day?
So I have one question for you, commissioners. So we have some county that neighbors us that has lots and lots of questions and hostilities about GMO farming on their public land and organic farming on their public land. Is that something that this should address? We're not there right now, but
On their public land, what does that mean?
on their count
Boulder won't allow
GMO
crops to be produced
Oh,
on
they're
there.
leasing the public land?
They own a lot of the farm ground in
Yeah, they
Boulder
own-
County.
18,
They're
20.
leasing it to a,
they let them do it every so many years.
They're just changing it right now, George, and it's causing a lot of concern, right? For one, they have a hard time finding farmers, and farmers are leaving fast because they are tired of dealing with it. But do you guys feel like that's something that should be addressed in a working tool like this, or is that a separate issue?
I don't personally, but
Good.
I agree with George.
Wow.
Does the open lands plan, I know it has the green little clouds in the foothills and areas of habitat. I don't recall, does it have agricultural priority areas in the open lands plan map?
Yeah,
Does
we had that.
anybody remember?
What did we call it? What did they call that? You
The-
probably don't remember, Jen, because you weren't here.
The Our Lands, Our Future stuff
Yeah,
that
did they-
Lou Grant started. Yes,
Yeah.
we did create
Okay,
little bubbles that
Yeah.
okay, good, good.
Was it, it wasn't Mountains to Plains, was it?
Part of that, yeah.
Was that what it's called?
No, that's
No.
different.
That's different,
the-
right?
But
Our
That's the
lands are
purchases.
future. That's
Okay,
right.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
yeah, that's right,
yeah.
that's what you said, yeah.
And I guess my other question is, how do we integrate this into the comprehensive plan or the land use code? Is that something you're looking at too?
Yes, I have been speaking with Leslie Ellis about how we can use this tool moving forward with the land use code. As you know, we have our consultants on board looking at the land use code. We've already conducted stakeholder meetings, and so we've met with a group of ag. Zach was there, and so, the ideas of, defining an agricultural district and those types of things. So this is part of that conversation.
And as long as that's voluntary, you think you'll have good, that will be received well by producers? Is that the key, that it's voluntary?
Yes,
I
that's what
think
we
so, and I think it'll be a year from now, we'll come with you with our ideas about that.
Okay.
Because it's not easy.
I know,
It's a package of incentives,
yeah,
basically. And,
yeah.
for example, are you willing to
No pun
give a
intended.
little on certain things and some of it's state, having to do with vehicles on a farm or a ranch, or there's other things that would require a lot of research on our part and talking to people that we haven't done.
Has the Agriculture Advisory Board had any contact with the new Commissioner of Agriculture that Governor Polis has appointed? Have you met with her, invited her to your meetings?
you haven't?
On to things that she's
not
presented?
formally as an ag advisory board. I mean, I've met with her a couple times, but not in the function of an ag advisory board. But
Would that be a good idea for your board,
yeah,
to have her here, or?
yeah.
Talk about
I think
Larimer
I think it
counties.
would be an effective thing to reach out to her and see what she thinks.
I mean, she has fairly niche experience in agriculture, I would say. So
Yeah, she's
Has
got a
any
lot of
experience in
background in this direct market, smaller farm.
I'm trying to be,
That was effective. You're good.
Diplomatic.
Just leave it alone.
Well done.
so, and some of the folks seem to be interested in broadening their experience and horizons and understanding of agriculture. Is a big industry with a lot of different, probably nobody understands it completely. But I think I think it would be good for her to understand the particular interests of Larimer County and the things that we've done like this, and I think that would be helpful. I know your board might not be looking for new things to do and more work, but I think that would be helpful, and maybe even some of us will be interested in participating in such a, this is your board, right, John? Yeah. I mean, I think it would be interesting to have her up here and a
Okay.
tour or a briefing or something about Larimer County agriculture, so that we're not forgotten.
Yep.
Just a suggestion, a little bit off topic.
Well off topic.
It's great.
as
Well,
only I
it
can.
is, but it is. I mean, agriculture is still a very large economic driver in Larimer County, even though it feels like we're slowly getting cornered. It's still a large economic
Literally,
driver.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Are you planning to share this tool with groups like the Colorado Farm Bureau or the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union?
Well, we have both. We have members of both on our ag board. One is quite active, and a couple of others are just members.
John, the intent of this tool is to help your staff.
And
If
in
you
our
guys direct us to make it more of a public document, I think we do so, but in general, this is internal.
Yeah, as we get to the ag district stage, I think you'd probably want to do more. That will be happening probably more, right?
Yeah.
More public
Well, maybe that-
education, input.
Maybe that could be a topic for discussion at one of the upcoming Ag Advisory Board meetings, and that is perhaps the pros and cons of having this tool be more, more out in the public, and perhaps the timing of that.
Well, again, we look to you guys to lead on that, to give us the suggestions, because we think it would be useful and to other jurisdictions, and we're kind of proud of it. But you need to charge us with stuff like that.
Well, and I'm suggesting because you folks are the experts, we have that conversation, and then we can share that with the fellow commissioners and determine is that a good idea to get it out there, or should we be waiting until we're looking at ag district kinds of issues? I don't know. I don't know the pros and cons.
We can definitely put that on an agenda.
Might be a brief discussion.
I think it's worthwhile.
Great. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Very good. Thanks a lot.
Time.
All right. Good work, everybody. You guys are doing great stuff. We're seeing you all the time, Zach.
Restaurants you love, delivered.
Not getting enough cash back with that credit card? Turn to the nerds. Want to invest that bonus? Turn to the nerds. Looking for the perfect mortgage? Turn to the nerds. Oops, sorry about that. Hey there, need a travel rewards card? Turn. Auto loan? 2. Want a lower interest rate? The nerds. The experts at NerdWallet make it easy to make smart money moves.